turn. Its Secretariat is blazing along. The first 3/4 of a mile in 109 4/5. Secretariat is widening now. He is moving like a tremendous machine. Secretariat by 12. Secretariat by 14 lengths on the turn. Sam is dropping back. It looks like they'll catch him today as My Gallant and Twice a Prince are both coming up to him now. But Secretariat is all alone. He's out there almost a 16th of a mile away from the rest of the horses. Secretariat is in a position that is impossible to catch. He's into the stretch. Secretariat leads his field by 18 lengths. And now Twice a Prince is taken second, and My Gallant has moved back to third. They're in the stretch. Secretariat has opened a 22-length lead. He is going to be the Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretariat to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance. He hits the finish 25 lengths in front. It's going to be Twice a Prince second, My Gallant third, Private Smiles fourth, and Sam, who had it today, dropped back to fifth. An amazing, unbelievable performance by this miracle horse. And look at Mrs. Sweetie. She's having the time of her life. She and Lucian Lawrence, who own this most magnificent animal, who is today...
We couldn't arrange for Secretariat to be here today, but we got you his owner, ladies and gentlemen, Penny Chenery.
Get me up. Huh. Hi. Ta-da!
Penny, have a seat right over here, please. And I see that you are appropriately dressed in the white and blue of the Meadow Stable. Being an announcer, we think in terms like that. Maybe we can put this over here on the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Get a little better view. And, all right, so I know I've been prompted. She doesn't want to talk about Secretary for the entire time we're here. But I can't let her go without at least one Secretariat story. So maybe you can just give me a little, I don't know, some anecdote of some sort about, you know, how you keep track of those horses and...
How I keep track?
Well, I know that you kept notes about these individuals from time to time, and I'm supposing you took notes about Secretariat?
Yeah. When I took over my father's breeding operation, we had maybe 30 mares, and I was living on Long Island and would go down to the farm in Virginia to see each new arrival. And sometimes my trainer would be with me, but I would, notebook like that, I would jot down something about each horse. And I saw Secretariat at about 3 days old, and what I wrote down was, he's too pretty to be a good horse.
Well, you got half of it right. Well, you got all of it right. He was pretty. That was a magnificent animal, and he had a presence about him.
Oh, yeah. He knew he was big stuff. And there's something interesting. There's a herd mentality in horses, and his dam was the leader of the pack. She was the number one.
Something Royal.
Something Royal, the name. And so Secretariat sort of inherited his way of going from his mother's self-esteem, and then he figured out that it was really his. But
Now we've got potential owners here, new owners.
yes.
You've been an owner for a long time, and you certainly must have something to impart to them.
Well, I wish I'd had an opportunity like this. I took over my father's racing operation. My mother died in an afternoon, just like that, and my dad slowly died with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and he had incorporated the stable, so I was on the board, but I was living in Colorado and raising children, and I had nobody to guide me. there were plenty of people who thought, that's the daughter. She won't know what's going on. We can try and make something out of this. And Bull Hancock, who the owner of Claiborne Farm, where Secretariat stood, was a friend, but I didn't want to be too green, and so I didn't ask him every question. And our trainer had been my father's trainer, and to him I was just the daughter, and I knew I couldn't live with Casey, but I didn't know who to get. And so I waited a year, and then something egregious happened, and I had the opportunity to change trainers. We went to the Jockey Club, and I had had a couple of names suggested to me. I wanted to know if they'd had any rulings against them. It was that rudimentary. So now there are all sorts of people that can guide you and answer your questions. And I thought what Stuart said this morning was very important. Don't listen to what they tell you about a trainer, listen to what they don't say about the trainer, because nobody's going to badmouth somebody else. And another tip I picked up was hang around people who are successful. If you see an owner or a trainer and you want to know more about them, go down to the paddock, see their horse, watch them with the horse, with the jockey, with their fellow trainers, and get an idea of their reliability, their stature.
Was it your experience that these people were very forthcoming and that they wanted to spend time with you answering these questions?
What people?
The trainers and the exercise riders and the breeders?
You know, owners don't talk to jockeys or exercise riders. You do everything, at least in my day, this is 40 years ago, do everything through your trainer. So he filters the information you get. And if you just rely on the trainer, you may be lucky and you may have a bad experience. But I think as owners, you need to do your own research by observation, by your presence, and striking up conversations with people around the track that look interesting or possibly articulate. Not all bettors are.
I learned that a long time ago, Mrs. Chenery. I did.
You know, most bettors aren't good horsemen. They're good bettors.
When you know, part of it is dealing with being around the horses and stuff like that, but a big part of ownership is being around people. I mean, and the racetrack people they're a great lot, and in the movie,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're very quirky. Lucian Lauren was your trainer, portrayed by John Malkovich in the movie as a lot quirkier than I ever suspected him to be, and I think it was more or less the movie's talking. But maybe you can address the fact about the people that you've had to interact with.
Well, Lucian was a godsend. He had trained for Bull Hancock. He had retired, and I had a trainer, but overnight, Ogden Phipps, his trainer, died of a heart attack, and so that trainer was, of course, shifted over. The Phippses were the largest privately owned stable, the most prestigious, and any trainer would kill for that job. And so I had to find a trainer, and I went to Bull, and he gave me 3 names. And the first one that answered was a Saturday, was Roger Lauren, who was, I think, 30. And
You'd have been pretty young then, yeah.
yeah, but he helped me tremendously because he was not non-judgmental. Now, I come from a very successful racing person, my father, and I didn't feel I could be a greenhorn. And so in Roger, I found someone I could ask the dumb questions of, like, what's a furlong? Did I know? What's a claiming race? I didn't know. Don't be embarrassed to
There are no bad questions.
But what I learned as an owner, and I feel very strongly about it, and that's why I'm still here, is that as owners, we're ambassadors for racing. And in my day, the old established racing families were very buttoned up. They didn't yell and scream, and there weren't 50 people in the winner's circle. And so the show-off that I was after the Belmont was really done on purpose, because I feel we have the obligation to share our excitement, our pride in our horse, our devotion to the industry with the fans, so they don't feel alienated. They will become shareholders in the industry with us. Also, I'm your basic show-off, so I was having fun.
I know where you're coming from. And number one piece of advice, if you could impart your very best piece of advice to anyone that's considering in it, or you didn't necessarily have to go into the game. There must have been something in your makeup. I mean, you were born to it, of course, but at that point, when your father died, you didn't have to continue on to. What was in your makeup that kept you in it so long?
I was a daddy's girl. What my dad did, I loved. And he had, of course, never won the Kentucky Derby. He had his first Derby entrant in 1950, and we'd had, I think, 4 respectable Derby horses, but hadn't won. And I knew that was on his bucket list, and he was nearly kicking the bucket. And help me, I was going somewhere with that story.
Let's see where.
Why did I carry on?
Yes. What in your makeup made you continue on with it?
I am determined, and see, I feel I was born on a horse. I started riding at 5, and I always had my own horse because my dad always kept riding horses. I didn't know much about the racetrack, but I was in love with horses. And also, some of the women in the audience may identify with this. I married after the war, moved to Colorado with my new husband, and raised the 4 children. And that kind of wasn't enough. It was a wonderful part of my life, but so I'm 50 and the youngest kid is going off to school, and I was dying for something to do. So this opportunity fit into my need.
And the rest is history.
Okay, girls.
Just one final question before we continue on here with the rest of the proceedings. Luck plays a lot in horse racing.
Oh, yeah.
And it played a lot of luck into you actually getting Secretariat. It was a flip of a coin. Mm-hmm. How much does luck really play into this?
Oh, so much, so much. You can plan everything and make good decisions and still maybe not hit the jackpot. And somebody else can come along and buy a California Chrome and it's lights out. So believe in luck.
Seems to be, though, that the people that are luckiest are the ones that work the hardest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We spent 30 years in the business before we were an overnight success. I looked up, because my father's secretary kept immaculate records. We bred 680 horses, and we came out with 2 Derby winners. It takes, you go through a lot of bad horses, learning yourself, refining your bloodlines. I guess that's what I have to say. You just keep at it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the charming, determined, and terrific Penny Chenery.
Thank you.